This week on Who Deserves to Be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting Joy Division and New Order into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week, we're looking at the case for Salford's England's Joy Division and New Order to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When the Hall put the groups up for nomination back in 2023, they put both bands into one single slot. Considering that New Order is Joy Division without their former lead singer Ian Curtis, I guess that makes sense. However, just as an example, Rage Against the Machine lost lead singer Zach De La Rocha for a little while, but the rest of the band stayed intact, grabbed new lead singers, rappers, and became Audioslave and Prophets of Rage before going back to being Rage Against the Machine, and only Rage Against the Machine is now in the Hall out of those groups. No, I'm not saying that Prophets were worthy of being in the Hall. Great band, though. What Joy Division did on their own before they became New Order makes them worthy of being in the Hall just by themselves. Let's explain for the people in the back there and start at the beginning. Joy Division's lead singer was Ian Curtis. Ian was born in England in 1956. As a child, he was very gifted, especially as a poet. Unfortunately, he was also bored in school and constantly got into trouble. He was caught shoplifting records and also stealing prescription pills from elderly people and then selling them to his friends. Hey, everybody's got to have a side gig. On June 4th, 1976, Ian went to a Sex Pistols show in Manchester, England. That particular show would impact a lot of people who went there. In fact, some of the people who went ended up being so inspired that they formed their own groups that went on to change music, such as the Smiths and the Buzzcocks. That show was where Ian met Bernard Sumner and Peter Hook. They decided to start a group together, found drummer Stephen Morris for the group, and called it Warsaw Pact, then just Warsaw, and then they finally decided on Joy Division. Joy Division had a very brief run of two major label releases. Their music was moody and ushered in the post-punk era of British music. Ian's style was quiet and his dancing was a little bit strange, but people couldn't stop looking at him on stage. What people didn't realize at the time was that Ian was suffering from seizures. In fact, he would sometimes have seizures while on stage and would have to be taken off for treatment. Ian was also suffering from depression, which got especially bad in 1980, leading to his untimely death in 1980. As far as the legacy goes, Joy Division remains one of the innovators of the post-punk revolution that happened in the 80s. Groups like The Cure and Depeche Mode followed their style and became huge. As far as why Joy Division should be considered for the Hall, well, it's definitely not for their hit singles or albums in America. In England, they had their 1979 album Unknown Pleasures go to number one and go platinum. Their 1980 album Closer, which came out 2 months after Ian's passing, also went to number one and went gold. Joy Division released 5 singles, but only 3 hit the British charts. 1979's Transmission went to number 4, 1980's Love Will Tear Us Apart, and Atmosphere She Lost Control both went to number 1. In America, though, it's worse. They had 0 hits. Even the one song that people in America know them for, Love Will Tear Us Apart, was never a hit here, charting as high as number 42 on the dance charts. Now, the reason why they should be in just as Joy Division is because of their huge influence on the post-punk era. Because seriously, if you've influenced both The Cure and Depeche Mode, and they're both now blissfully in the Hall, shouldn't you put Joy Division, who influenced them both and has been eligible for induction since 2004, in as well? Just saying. Now, all of that is well and good, but New Order could also be in as its own separate nomination. After Ian's death, rather than break up the band, guitarist Bernard Sumner, bassist Peter Hook, and drummer Stephen Morris decided to do something different. First, they grabbed keyboardist Gillian Gilbert, who was Morris's girlfriend at the time. Then they decided to marry punk rock with a brand new sound that was just beginning to bubble up from the underground at that time, electronic music, which was different from the synth pop that had taken over Great Britain during the 80s. Then they made the music danceable. Some people called it alternative dance. The band combined post-punk rock with EDM and anchored what became known as the Manchester music scene, a play on the word Manchester since they were from basically Manchester. And the group had developed a now iconic music pedigree. Even if you don't know or love EDM, or you don't know their hits like True Faith or Bizarre Love Triangle, you definitely know what is officially the biggest selling 12-inch record of all time, Blue Monday. As New Order, they put out 10 studio albums. Of those, only 1993's Republic managed to go top 15, landing at number 11. In England, though, completely different story, as 11 of their albums went top 10, with 6 of those 11 albums hitting number 1. Singles-wise, they put out 39 of them. New Order did well on the U.S. dance charts with 15 top 10 songs, including 5 that hit number 1. In England, 24 singles hit the top 10, with 16 of those 24 going to the top spot. Blue Monday, by the way, was released twice, back in 1983 and in 1988. Both releases went to number 1 in England, while the 1983 original release went to number 5 in America, and the 1988 re-release went to number 1 in America. Between both bands, with the amount of influence that they had on the British music scene and in turn on the American music scene, especially thanks to MTV, you would think that they would have gotten into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by now, since they've been eligible since 2005 as New Order and 2004 as Joy Division. And yet, no, not yet. What gives, Hall? It's about time that you put both Joy Division and New Order into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And if you want to put them both in at the same slot there, I've got absolutely no problem with that whatsoever.